Well, now it's time for the final look at the final of the three main supporting characters of Trigun, and that character, of course, is the traveling priest of Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Now, Wolfwood is a very interesting and likable character, not because of how similar he is to Vash, but because of how of a near-complete opposite he is, though their bond is also an indestructible bond based off of differences but mutual respect. On paper, they should not get along at all, as their views are extremely different, and this should drive them to conflicts. But both are such enduring and upstanding characters that they respect their differences and grow to basically become brothers. Like all brothers, they do fight from time to time and have a good deal of petty disagreements, though they are always there for each other and seem to be genuinely kind and loving of each other. The tragic tale of Wolfwood is thus one of a lost brother being redeemed by his righteous brother, and finally finding some degree of peace in both the world around him and himself. But first, who is Wolfwood? Nicholas D. Wolfwood is first introduced in episode 9 when he is found stranded in the desert and rescued by Vash, who spots him as a speck on the horizon. Later in the episode, Wolfwood and Vash team up to rescue a lost child, and the episode reveals much of Wolfwood's character, which is fleshed out later on. He is a priest, he runs an orphanage, and he is also a great fighter and wit. From this point on, Wolfwood shows up in subsequent episodes until finally permanently joining and rejoining the party on their quest to help Vash stop knives and the cycle of hatred and violence he is propagating. Once he does so, Wolfwood proves to be a very credible threat in his own right, and even begins a romantic relationship with Millie, whom he fancies as a good girl. This unfortunately is cut short with Wolfwood's tragic death in episode 23, as he is killed by his former master, though not until having come to terms with himself and coming to understand and embrace Vash's brand of pacifism. All of this comes, of course, after the revelation that Wolfwood is actually one of the Gung Ho Guns, though he does betray them to go finally chart his own path and follow Vash. While dead, Wolfwood's legacy lives on, however, and his cross even goes on to save Vash during his final confrontation, after Wolfwood's spectral voice reminds Vash that he has it on him. Wolfwood has thus directly and indirectly helped end the hate and bring peace to the world. Now, this is a world which Wolfwood seems to distrust and loathe. Wolfwood is a textbook cynic with a good heart. While we will speak more on his heart later, we must first ask why is he such a cynic. The answer is relatively obvious and explained by Wolfwood himself. He has no real choice. He has had no real choice. As a youth, he went from an abusive household to a foster system literally meant to construct assassin priests from childhood. Wolfwood's path was charted for him before he could really influence it. As a child, he didn't really have the ability, power, or mental abilities to back out of a system which eventually took over his life. As an adult, he has too many other responsibilities which would be jeopardized if he tried to back out. Think of the orphans. He is a cynic born from a lack of agency. As an adult, even with great power, his agency is still limited, and his path still seems pre-decided. Even if he could hypothetically break free, the Gung Ho Guns would simply threaten the orphans he cares for. His great individual agency is thus not enough to totally liberate him from the brutal facts on the ground, and this hardens his heart and creates an inclination towards quick and decisive action, even if thinking something over might be better. That is not to say Wolfwood is an impulsive man. I think instead he's a very thoughtful and smart one, but just to say that he believes in settling issues as soon as they arise. As someone inclined to do so from birth and later trained to do so, Wolfwood believes that the worst action is not taking any action. In his eyes, action will always somehow change the status quo, and usually for the better, and hesitation will only allow problems to magnify in scale. As a result, Wolfwood is an extremely pragmatic man, and willing to use all methods and tools available to him in order to nip problems as soon as they arise. Of course, these methods and tools include violence. Now, Wolfwood never uses force because he wants to or because he just doesn't care, but out of a genuine belief that the ends justify the means, and that ending conflict and suffering is the ultimate end. This, of course, has consequences of its own, as it means Wolfwood has done many morally questionable things in his pursuit of what he deems right. While the ends have always been justified, his means have not always been so, and this fuels a deep-seated conflict within Wolfwood. The root of this conflict is whether or not Wolfwood is a good person. While he might argue he is because of his noble goals and dedication, he might also argue he is not because of all the dubious means he has employed to these ends. While he might say he is because he is a priest looking to support orphans and spread the love of God, which he does do, he might also say he is not because he is an assassin who has killed many without a second thought, which he has also done. He might say he is good because his heart is overall good, looking to help people, but he might also say he is not, as he has hurt many in the pursuit to help others. Wolfwood's conflict is one critical to the character, and one of the own chains restricting his agency. Not only has Wolfwood's past restrained himself, but so now his conscience does too. He is bogged in a moral swamp which forces him to level his past, his actions, and his decisive nature against his profession, his desire to help, and his conscience. In this way, Wolfwood proves an interesting mirror to the character of Vash. Both are on quest to, quote, spread love and peace, although they go about it completely differently, and their end goals, while the same, are pursued completely differently. Vash does so by living in a way which tries to minimize conflict between himself and the world, and hopes to minimize conflict between others by being pacifistic. Wolfwood, on the other hand, tries to be as decisive as possible and eliminate problems as he sees fit, and he does so as soon as he possibly can due to how decisive he is. This in turn means Wolfwood has the opposite problems as Vash's character. While Vash's character is prone to run away and just try to let things be, which creates the issue of problems getting out of hand, Wolfwood, on the other hand, unconsciously creates problems by trying to solve them as soon as possible. They both represent extreme ends of the spectrum in terms of action and agency, and how much one uses and how soon one uses their own to solve problems. And as extremes of any spectrum, they both exhibit problems connected to either extreme. Wolfwood's conscience, however, is one which ultimately prevails, and Wolfwood does achieve a degree of liberation thanks to both Millie and Vash, however. These are two characters which Wolfwood has strong emotions over due to how they carry themselves. Wolfwood loves Millie because of her wholesome nature and derives genuine care and affection on the part of Wolfwood. He knows she is extremely wholesome and he wants to protect this. Millie, for her part, sees Wolfwood's pain and inner conflict and wants to help him find peace with himself. She wants to help him come to terms with himself and move on from his past. Vash, on the other hand, at first creates a strong sense of dislike and later jealousy, and finally brotherly love and respect. This originates from their first meeting, where Wolfwood notes Vash's extreme pacifism and dismisses it as unrealistic and untenable. While this may be true to an extent, it is also Wolfwood actively trying to justify his actions. If Vash's path is tenable, it means Wolfwood has made very poor life decisions and doesn't want to deal with the emotional ramifications of them. He doesn't want to deal with the guilt that his decisive nature has possibly heaped upon him. He doesn't want to feel even more regret over his own decisions, and as the two travel together more though, Wolfwood grows to respect Vash's dedication to his own morals, and grows a little jealous of the fact that Vash never compromises his ideals while Wolfwood does constantly. Finally, Wolfwood confronts himself, and finally starts to come to terms with the fact that he has not always made the most righteous decisions. He starts to accept that he is partially to blame for the cycle of violence and hate he finds himself caught in, and partially to blame for the powerlessness he keeps finding beating him down. He then sees Vash as his brother and friend, and finally resolves to turn over a new leaf. He does this when he spares Chapel, his old mentor, and finally feels a sense of satisfaction on how he ended a confrontation. While this does unfortunately get him killed, Wolfwood has time for one last act of redemption, in the emotional confession scene. This scene, one of the most heartful I've seen in any series, is one of a conflicted man finally coming to terms with his deeds. Wolfwood kneels before an altar and a cross. He admits he has run from his past and never actually confessed his sins before, and that he can't run away anymore. He admits he has done wrong, though only when he saw he is needed. He has admitted he has had a tough life, though he also admits that that doesn't necessarily justify everything he's done. He admits that he's tired and he wants peace. He's finally able to be completely honest with himself, and before God no less. And while he ultimately wanted to continue living, he has accepted that he cannot, and his life ends, as he is left posing before an altar and a light shines upon him. His life ends in a penitent and peaceful pose. With Wolfwood's final act of contrition, we see a man who has finally come to terms with his past, and fixed the heirs of his own. And this illustrates another message Vash tries to spread to the world. Wolfwood illustrates that someone can indeed change their ways and try to make up for the mistakes of the past. Throughout the entire series, Vash tries to prove this, and even though Wolfwood is doubtful and very conflicted about it, he ultimately does so. And he is the perfect character to do so. He is the perfect character to do so because his character is the very definition of not looking back. Wolfwood's decisive and quick nature, in addition to his tendency to try and justify the means with the ends, creates a man who in essence cannot change his ways because they are the only thing holding together his fragile morality. He needs the ends to justify the means because the means he has employed are already compromising what would be left of a normal morality. The fact that Vash eventually gets Wolfwood to turn over a new leaf, and the fact that it does indeed bring Wolfwood some degree of peace, however, do justify Vash's morality to an extent. It does show that people can change themselves for the better and can indeed find peace in doing so. While Wolfwood does a lot of learning, that's not to say he doesn't teach anyone anything either. Wolfwood's presence is an educational one for many in the series, including Vash's. As Vash is too pacifistic to necessarily always confront his problems, Wolfwood brings a good deal and dose of practicality for the brain cast. You see, Wolfwood is in fact the one that picks Vash up when Vash first decides to run away midway through the series as Eric's. Wolfwood is the one who finds him and says, "You gotta pick yourself up and get things done. Running away from your problems won't solve anything." While Wolfwood has the opposite problem, he tends to run straight into his problems and escalate them sometimes. He does realize that running away from problems is in itself a very big problem. And he helps Vash and many of the cast and audience realize that although he might be a little too decisive, decisive action is very often important. He stands against the idea of running away from problems or denying them. Note how when he visits the hidden city in the sky, he is the only one who has to tell them that this is a unsustainable lifestyle. The people in there will have to learn to live in the real world one day, and that the real world is ruthless, and that one must always be prepared for it. Yes, indeed, Wolfwood's pragmatism is something that needs to be conveyed to the entire cast. Wolfwood's presence is just essential to the main cast, as he provides a kernel of pragmatism to contrast the views of Vash, and to contrast the actions of Vash. He makes sure that Vash is always on the right track, and that he's still confronting his problems instead of running away from them. The fact that Wolfwood and Vash are completely opposites is actually very good, as it means they balance each other out. Vash tempers Wolfwood's decisive action, and Wolfwood tempers Vash's passivity. In the end, Wolfwood teaches Vash how to stand up for himself, and the importance of doing so. So, is Wolfwood a good man? I would say in the end, yes, he is. He is a very flawed and conflicted one, but a good man. While genuinely seeing the world as a cold and harsh place, he also genuinely sees humanity as a flawed but savable people. He knows this because he himself is a very flawed man seeking redemption and peace. He knows people are far from perfect, but he also knows that they can be good, and most of them ultimately want to strive to live good lives. He is a priest of the people, and flips the idea of a distant preacher on its head. Like normal people, Wolfwood swears, sins, and does anything a normal person might. He is most definitely not a paradigm of moral behavior, and this breaks down any moral divider which might exist between him and the lay people. As a man of God, but also a man of action, Wolfwood seems to believe that the articles used to clean are often the dirtiest. All of this, however, is rooted in a genuine reverence for God and a genuine love of the people. While he lacks agency, he never seems to blame God or religion. Instead, he sees the flaws of his life as originating in the flaws of man. In fact, he leans on religion and God from time to time, and definitely tries to hold to good religious values as much as he can. His last act, after all, is an act of reverence to God, and his spectral message to Vash in the knives fight seems to prove God is satisfied with this. God is satisfied with a man who only wanted to help people, a man who unfortunately had to make some poor decisions due to the constraints forced upon him by the world, a man who loved humanity and just wanted to help it, a man who ultimately was a man of God